Everdark, Episode 105, Exposed. Last on Everdark, Balthazar and Christian made huge inroads on their relationship, with Christian realizing his fear of being controlled had still made him very distrustful of Balthazar. But he knows that Balthazar is not, and could never be, David. Trust restored, they go together to the Well of All Souls. Now we return to Damon and Julian in the museum. Julian stared at the sea of dead bodies in all their finery fanned out across the floor like fallen blooms. He was reminded for a moment of a documentary he'd seen, of the Jim Jones compound, where they showed seemingly unending ground covering of their brightly covered shirts and shorts. The contrast was shocking and somehow made it all so unbelievable. Moments ago, he had been agonizing over one man's death in Zachary, and now, how many dead were there? The string quartet had died just as quickly as the guests, so the museum was eerily silent, except for the sound of air moving in the vents and the tick and crack of the building settling. It seemed impossible that this place had been filled with voices and laughter just moments ago.
They had no idea that this was going to be their last night on Earth.
Julian realized with a startling, almost horrific clarity. He thought of the server who had gleefully gotten them the best nibbles and champagne, not to mention the door guard who had been so proud to show them around. Rich or poor, important or not, everyone was dead together in the end.
They were likely planning what was coming next, thinking about tomorrow or the day after that or the day after that. But now, they're gone. Gone to some place that I can't even imagine.
And it was all because of one Caliph vampire. Not a horde of them, just one. And that was terrifying. Could Caliph kill a city in one go? What about everyone on a continent? Julian's chest felt tight, and a dread numbness washed over him.
Why did she do this?
Julian whispered. Because she thought that they would be better dead than under my rule. Damon spoke softly, but there was something in his tone that cut through Julian's numbness. Damon was angry, more so than he had ever seen him. Fires flickered in the vampire king's eyes. He was holding on to the soul stone he had created so tightly that Julian feared he might crush it to powder. But no, that would end his torment of Kara's soul, and Julian knew he was far from done doing that.
Can you bring them back?
Julian asked Damon. He had faint hopes for this, but he had to ask. At times, Damon's powers seemed limitless, and then there were other moments like this, when it was clear that Damon could not stop every bad thing from happening or reverse it. No, they immediately passed beyond the veil, Damon confirmed. His jaw muscles flexed as he gazed at the gaily dressed corpses. There were so many of them that they hardly looked real.
There were other vampires here, not just Kara. What about them? Are they dead too? Were they in this with her?
Julian asked. He sensed no one but him and Damon here, but he was loath to stretch out his senses too far. There was an almost mental stink about the place. They left. Quickly. If they were a part of this, they will pay for it, Damon murmured. At that moment, Julian saw the strobe of red and blue lights from a police vehicle cruising down the main road after a speeder. His heart was in his throat, thumping wildly. How long before someone realized that there was something wrong at the museum? And if they came here and found Julian and Damon among all the dead, what would happen then? Damon could use the Eiros gift of mind control on them, or they could simply teleport away from here. But there would be physical evidence of them being there on the security footage and people's phones. Damon was simply too striking to miss. The huge, preternaturally handsome man with the red eyes who happened to be talking to the mayor just before he dropped dead? And though Julian knew that his and Christian's show wasn't on a broadcast network or anything, he was a favorite son of the city, so even though he wasn't as striking as Damon, he would be noticed too. No, teleporting or mind control would not work. There was simply too much evidence of them being there to walk away. 2 people out of hundreds surviving? The police, the FBI, hell, even the military might be called in. No, scratch that, they would be called in. This would be considered a terrorist incident. Julian could just imagine Damon's reaction to military or police forces, so that couldn't happen either. They couldn't walk away, but this was well beyond the two of them. They needed help.
We need to call someone. Balthazar. We need to call Balthazar.
Julian fished out his cell phone, but Damon lifted a hand up. Balthazar is not on Earth. He is in the Everdark. There was a pause, and then a faint smile appeared on Damon's lips. He is going to the Well of All Souls.
What? I thought he was going to the Winter Compound.
Julian tightened his hand around the cell phone. While he had the utmost faith in Damon for most things, navigating the modern world and the people in power seemed a very Balthazar gift. Damon glared at the soul stone in his palm before closing it and saying, "Perhaps I should just thwart her now and reveal us to the humans. Hiding this will be near impossible. Perhaps we should just wait and expose it all."
What? No!
The words burst from Julian's lips before he had time to consider it. Damon turned surprisingly hurt eyes towards him, and Julian quickly grasped his shoulders to stem the tide of that pain.
Look, no matter what you do, if you reveal vampires' existence now, we will forever be associated in people's minds with a room full of dead bodies,
Julian told him.
We can't have a night where most of the city's elite are slaughtered and vampires are revealed. There will always be the taint of Kara's actions associated with vampires, and we can't have that. Even if humans understand it's one bad vampire here, and we know there are more than that, the humans will be even more afraid than they already would be with the revelation that vampires exist.
Damon stroked his chin as he considered this. You are right. I will not have one such as her set the stage for my ascension. Damon smiled at him strangely then.
What?
Julian asked. You called them humans. You did not associate yourself with them. Julian blinked. He hadn't realized what he was saying at the time, but Damon was right. He hadn't thought of himself as one of them at all. He nodded.
Ever since talking to Zachary, I finally get it, you know? I'm not like I was. I'm not like other people here.
You are not like other vampires either. Damon caressed his cheek. Julian smiled up at him.
One step at a time.
Yes, one step at a time. Julian caught sight of the mayor and felt another wave of disbelief and despair flow through him.
What about the city? How is it going to survive this, Damon? The mayor, the police chief, half a dozen judges, and those are just the people I can see from here.
Julian slowly turned.
These people run this town, and they're all gone. The power vacuum. I don't know what's going to happen next. Vampires may need to take over here. Otherwise there'll be chaos, investigations, so much danger to everyone.
What do you suggest we do? Damon asked him, all calm once more. His mind was like a placid sea. He was giving nothing away about his own thoughts. Julian raked a hand through his hair.
I have no idea. If we can hide this, that would likely be the best plan. For now, anyways. But do the vampires have that kind of political power to do that? To really keep this under wraps?
There will be more incidents, Julian, which will be inexplicable to humanity. If Calais or their allies truly wish to sow chaos, they can. Damon regarded the dead dispassionately. Secrecy will have us fighting on multiple fronts. Them and humans. Julian's shoulders slumped.
I see what you're saying.
I should have been able to stop this, Damon whispered. But sometimes the close things one misses. But I cannot miss them anymore.
This is not your fault, Damon.
Julian cried.
Kara alone is responsible for this. And Callie, for making her think such crazy thoughts about you.
Damon framed his face. You know the good in me. They only see the potential for bad. But even you are nervous about me ruling everyone. Julian jolted. This was true. But he tried to explain himself.
I think I'd be nervous about anyone ruling everyone. But if there's one person who could do it and do it well, it would be you.
Damon's eyes were like embers. Change is coming, Julian. I can see it now. And with change comes destruction. That is the way of things. Julian wondered how much destruction Damon was seeing and what kind. He knew it would not be this kind. Damon would not slaughter innocents. That was the key difference.
I believe in you, Damon,
Julian told him with a sudden clarity.
You cared about Zachary. Kara didn't. She didn't care about anyone.
Damon leaned in and kissed Julian's forehead. When he pulled back, Julian felt clear-headed and less panicky. He was still worried as all hell, but he could think. Julian began.
So we need someone to help us, and if Balthazar is out—
He is, I'm afraid. They are going to try something rather clever, Damon said, smiling. It seemed that Balthazar always made Damon smile. It was good to see that. Though the icy anger still remained, thoughts of Balthazar and whatever he and Christian were up to pleased Damon enough to push away some of that frosty rage.
All right then. Arceus, and maybe the Winters. Definitely the Winters,
Julian said, realizing that a vampire house full of spies were probably the best suited for this sort of thing. He went to use his cell phone, but Damon's hand covered it.
What?
Reach out to Arceus with your mind, Damon suggested. Julian wanted to argue that they didn't have time for training, but he stopped himself. If Damon sensed danger at this moment, he would not have suggested this. The people around them were all dead, so there was no need to move quickly on their behalf. So maybe this was the time. So he nodded. Close your eyes. It will help. And picture Arceus in your mind, Damon instructed.
Can't get enough of the Merman series? This world doesn't end with the Merman 2. I wrote another serial sequel called Tidebound, an arranged marriage, enemies to lovers romance. Tidebound is complete at 51 chapters. Merlord, Alaric Silver, hates humans, dry land, and Meryl Bexes, aka Bex. But in order to save his people from the monsters in the Sundering Deep, must marry the mortal-loving mare Bex. For his part, Bex cannot stand the arrogant and cold Alaric and wants nothing to do with the cutthroat Mare Royal Society, but in order to save his parents from an immortal lifetime in prison, Bex must join his life to the Mare Lords. Like the Merman 2 House of Air, Tidebound is only available as a serial story on my members-only site, wraithrain.com. Sign up for a month and read both of these sexy Merman romances, as well as so much more. Sign up link is in the description.
Julian did as he asked. At first, all he could picture were the dead spread out all around him. That was when he realized that he was seeing them, but they were all dull husks. They carried no spark. Strangely, he could see the light around some of the objects in the museum, as if they held light. They have the touch of the Everdark about them, Damon explained. Julian's eyelids flew open. What? Damon smiled again, less frost about him, and he put a hand over Julian's eyes. Close your eyes, fledgling. I am teaching you here.
Yes, but you just said something fascinating, and—
Julian's enthusiasm died as he realized that these dead objects had more life in them than the people's bodies did.
Okay, contacting Arceus, but you need to explain that to me later.
Of course. I will tell you all, in time. Damon's hand moved from over his now closed eyes into his hair. It became a gentle caress. Julian leaned into it as he opened his mind again. With each of the gifts, Julian had felt an almost instinctual sense of what to do. They were like pathways through the woods. He could see them all spread out before him, and one of them would light up. That was the one he wanted to follow. So he followed it, and his mind opened to the museum and then beyond it. For one moment he felt like he was in the sky, looking down upon the entirety of the city. Every person was a flickering light. He could touch hundreds of thousands of minds. Any one he wanted could open to him. It was breathtakingly beautiful. A murmuring rose up from all of those lights. It started to get louder and louder as he felt himself being pulled downwards to all of those lights. No, Julian. Do not get so close, Damon said. Their minds will overwhelm you. Look only for Arceus. Julian nodded, or thought he did, but the truth was that he was hardly aware of his body. He was floating, flying still above the city. He went higher again so that the voices from the mines were only the faintest murmur on the breeze. Then he noticed something. Not all of the sparks of light were the same color. Most were a blue-white, but others were red.
The red ones
Are vampires. Yes, Damon answered. Julian flew over the city, amazed at how many red ones there were, until he was hovering over Ravenscroft Manor. Other than the acolytes, everyone was red. Julian's forehead furrowed.
How do I know which one is Arceus?
He asked. Picture him, as I said. Damon reminded him. Julian did, and to his surprise and delight, one of the red sparks glowed brightly. Julian grinned.
I found him.
Good. Excellent, Julian. Now you must touch his mind and speak with him like we do. But gently, my fledgling. You do not wish to alarm him. Damon urged.
You mean don't squish his mind like a bug?
Julian grinned. That too. The Vampire King answered with a touch of dry humor. Julian moved towards that brighter spark that was Arceus. He hovered a few feet away, unsure how to connect with the other vampire when he didn't have a body. But he found he could reach, as he did with Damon, and suddenly he was surrounded by the confessor's thoughts and warmth. Arceus immediately recognized him, and there was joy in this mental meeting. A lump formed in Julian's throat at the caring he felt from the other vampire. Being in Arceus's mind was like receiving a bear hug from the confessor.
Julian, how unexpected, but wonderful.
The thoughts formed easily, and Julian heard them in Arceus's baritone voice. Concern crept in as he realized that such contact should be very unexpected, considering Julian and Damon went out for a night on the town.
But what has caused you to reach out like this?
They're all dead, Arceus. She killed them all,
Julian said, the enormity of what Kara had done overwhelming him as he had to explain it to another.
Open your mind to me, Julian, and let me see.
Arceus tenderly offered. Julian imagined doors opening wide to the museum. He felt Arceus step through them and go through his memories. When he was done, in mere seconds, he felt the confessor step back and close Julian's memories like one might a book, only reading what he was allowed to read, and no more.
You were right to reach out to me, and I believe the Winters can help.
Arceus told him with approval. There was a grim sadness in the confessor, but also a flare of the same anger as had been in Damon. This was an affront.
I have shared this with Rajani. Already, she is moving to have the proper people notified.
Yes, of course. We're fine,
Julian assured him.
I loathe to ask you and the king to do such menial tasks as watch a building, but...
Arceus, the king is happy to do so. Damon intervened, and Julian realized he had been there all along, watching and guiding.
Thank you, King Damon. All shall be taken care of, I swear it.
Arceus told him, and Julian felt the mental bow. Then the two of them separated from Arceus's mind. Julian opened his eyelids, and Damon was standing just a few inches away. His hands were framing Julian's waist, and he was studying Julian's face. You did very well. Truly, you are an extraordinary fledgling, Damon murmured. Julian blushed.
Considering I'm your only fledgling, you don't really have anyone to compare me to. I mean, at least Balthazar has Elgar and Christian to compare. For all you know, if you had another fledgling, they'd be better than me.
Damon enfolded Julian in his arms. Now you speak foolishly.
I try.
Julian closed his eyes and rested for a moment in Damon's embrace. But then he shook himself.
We need to make sure that no one else comes here and sees this.
That sounds wise. Lead on, Julian, Damon suggested.
We weren't the only people coming in. I'm not sure how far Kara's, gift extended.
Julian said and felt queasy as he now saw that they would have to pick their way through the bodies to get to the front entrance. He made a sound which caused Damon to query him. What's wrong?
I'm just already thinking of these people's bodies as things to get around and deal with, not people anymore.
Julian said as he led them through the foyer. You should not feel badly for this. You saw their souls leave. You know that these are no longer people, Damon answered, though he was careful not to disturb the bodies they stepped over either. Julian stopped as he saw both the server and the guard near one another, nearly touching. She must have been holding a tray because it was lying on the ground, the canapé smashed beneath it. His arms were sprawled out to the sides of him, as if he had pinwheeled trying to keep his balance as his soul had left his body. Julian's chest felt tight. My one. Damon squeezed his shoulder as Julian's eyes burned with angry tears.
This isn't right,
Julian said under his breath.
I know these people went to another place. It may be a better place, I don't know. But they weren't done here. This wasn't their time.
Damon did not answer, but Julian saw him playing with the soul stone with Kara's soul inside. He had no problem with Damon doing whatever he wanted to her. She'd had no right to do this.
Did Callie want this?
Julian asked as he finally forced his feet to move towards the entrance. He already saw something that was worrying him, flickering rectangular lights. No, they did not. If I were like them and judged everything that happened due to their acts, I would impute this to them, Damon said. Though his tone was calm, Julian knew there was deep anger here.
Do they know what's happened?
Julian asked as he stepped through the doors and felt his blood run cold. Yes, I think so, Damon answered. And that is why they are silent now. Julian would have pursued that, but he couldn't drag his eyes away from the carnage. There were dozens of bodies on the stairs, all crumpled where they had been standing, waiting to get in. The rectangular lights were their phones, lighting up as people tried to reach them. The line of bodies went all the way out to the parking lot. There was no one alive but him and Damon until the street. No one had noticed the bodies yet as they drove by quickly, going to a nightclub or restaurant, but someone would notice eventually.
Arceus, how far are you out?
Julian asked.
3 minutes away.
Arceus responded.
The Winters are coming too, about a minute after me.
You need to hurry. There are bodies in plain sight of the road.
Julian said.
Should we move them?
No.
Arceus stated.
Leave things as they are for now.
How can this be explained? How can this be hidden?
Julian let out a low sigh.
These people are already being missed.
And that was when he saw the news cameras on the ground around the steps. He saw microphones and recognized at least one anchor from the late-night news.
Oh no.
There had been reporters here. They had been recording the gala. Had any of these been live feeds? If there were, there was suddenly a steady whump, whump, whump sound filling the air. Julian's head snapped upwards, his eyes widened. There was a news helicopter coming, not just one, half a dozen. At least one of the feeds must have been live when everyone dropped dead. And that wasn't all. He'd heard the wail of sirens in the distance. A phalanx of cop cars, all lights flashing, was coming around the corner of the boulevard. Julian turned to Damon, eyes wide, heart in his throat once more. It looked like things had already spiraled out of control. Join us next time for episode 106, The Well of All Souls.
Original work is harder and harder to find in a world full of reactions, commentary, plagiarism, and generic ChatGPT content. And I'm really glad you found us. Every word of the story is from me, typed into my laptop while sitting on my couch. And a real person spoke every word into a microphone as well, not an AI voice. I got into producing stories because I care about entertaining you, the human who's listening to this right now. And while we certainly could have had a bot army to listen to episodes, leave realistic comments, and make us look really popular, it just wouldn't be satisfying. I'm glad you're with me for this story, and I would love it if you left a comment just to say hello.